station where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
Right, crop circles. So we began here something like 23 years ago in this very room, that was a bit bigger in those days, talking about crop circles. Thank you for coming. It's very impressive to see so many of you. I'm sorry some of you are on the floor. No, I did say 8 o'clock start. But anyway, there we are, that's what you get. If you want to know the full story, we're going to cover as much of it tonight. We were hoping at one point Nexus magazine would be here, but the new Nexus magazine is not yet here, but there will be my roundup of all this year's crop circles in the forthcoming Nexus magazine. In 2 weeks, is that right? Out in 2 weeks, so October. And you can buy Nexus literally anywhere. W.H. Smith, anywhere that sells magazines, you'll find Nexus. So have a look and you'll see my written account. But what I'm going to do today is, as ever, for those of you that have been to these sessions before, we're going to look at every UK formation that occurred this summer. We're going to look at the best of the overseas formations. But I'm also aware, and this is where some of you can go to sleep for 10 minutes, we have new people here tonight that might not know the background circles. So we're going to just start with a very quick 10-minute resume of what crop circles are about and what people may think they're about before we come to this year. So are we all right with that? Yeah. And if you're not, I'm going to do it anyway. So, Marcus, could you just hit that light switch just above your head, please? That'd be pretty lovely. Lovely, thanks so much. Now, talking of heads, I need your head to just come forward a bit because I need to zap you. There we go. Fantastic. You're right there, as long as you don't mind seeing me hitting you on the head. Right, so let's begin. So last year, a lot of people were saying, well, maybe it's curtains for the crop circles, maybe it's had its time. A lot of people felt they were connected with the 2012 prophecies and all of that. And certainly last year was quieter a year than many we'd had. It was a very late start. And didn't start till June, and then the newspapers started running the stories that there have been no crop circles at all we're speaking of, when that was not true. And in fact, by the end of the summer, we hadn't had a bad year really, but there was nonetheless a feeling that maybe it was on the decline. But this year, no, the decline reversed. We've had a very good year for crop circles. So instead of just thinking it'll all now fade away as some sort of past remnant of some sort of other new agey time, not at all. That they've come back with a bit of a vengeance, as we're about to see. But where did it all begin? Well, some of you know, of course, that they've been with us, in fact, for hundreds of years, very clearly. This very famous drawing, The Mowing Devil, of 1678, is just one of many old accounts of what clearly are crop circles. And we've got photographs from the 1930s onwards. This has been with us in some form or another for a very long time. So it's not just some modern prank that only began a few years ago. That said, it was the 1970s where we began to see this kind of surge forward. And back then, by and large, they were circles. They were essentially this, but occasionally more complex designs. Any crop will do. Rapeseed here, wheat, barley, obviously, rye, oats, flax, sweet corn, maize. Actually, anything sooner or later seems to get used. They weren't cut, they weren't dead, they just spiralled around in whatever direction. And it was thought at first it was the weather, which seemed reasonable. And so the first people to seriously study them were meteorologists. And they considered that this was a whirlwind or a vortex, of some kind. But then, of course, it didn't stay like that. And as the years moved on into the 80s, they began to grow more complex, they became symmetrical, and that, of course, stretched the weather models. And so, inevitably, then you get the world of UFO research become involved. And so some people said, well, maybe it's where a craft has landed in the field. But others thought there's definitely some other force going on here. And part of the reason that people think that is because strange lights are very often seen in and around crop circles. And if you go online, you'll find many videos showing you these lights wandering around these things almost as if they know what they're doing. So some would say these lights are intelligently controlled. Others say that it has a natural feeling. Maybe it's something like ball lightning. Maybe it's even both. But certainly there is peripheral phenomena around the crop circles that's very odd, and it's not entirely easy just to explain it away. But as soon as you get a light and you christen it a UFO, which is exactly what it is unidentified and it's a flying object, nonetheless there's a connotation in our culture that it is intelligent. So the belief that there was an intelligent force at work, of course, then pushed forward even more in 1990 when these pictograms began to appear. And so 1990 was the big leap forward for the phenomenon, lots of press coverage, lots of TV, and really it's amazing to think today these were reported almost without cynicism for a short while. Of course that wouldn't last. But people realised very quickly they were made with very meticulous quality. And we'll see later on with this year, you know, there's some incredible craft work going on inside some of these formations. And young green plants are worth seeing crop circles in because wheat and barley is like a house plant. Many of them have silvery blooms filmed on top of the stems. If you just run your finger along one of the stems, you'll remove the bloom and you'll leave a fingerprint. You tread on it, you'll leave a footprint. And yet so many formations don't show signs of damage. So this is curious. When you then look at known man-made designs, and here's one made for the History Channel some years ago, you very often do find these white crease marks and breakage to the stems, which always seems to be there in known man-made designs, and yet so many formations you just can't seem to see it. So some would say there is a clear difference between very obviously manually flattened crop and other ones. Of course, the other, whatever the other is part of the big debate. Another thing worth knowing, if you didn't already know it, is a gentleman here like the late William Levengood. He was one of the first of the biophysicists to test plant samples from crop circles and discover changes occurring inside which you could not replicate by manually flattening down the plants. And so this becomes important because when you look at things like the embryonic seed heads in young green plants, they are notably mutated compared to normal samples. And those knuckles you get, the nodes on wheat and barley, are often abnormally swollen or elongated. And in the opinion of people like Levengood and others like Eljo Hasselhoff, there is something going on here which has got nothing to do with manual implements. It's almost certainly some kind of microwave energy, if you wish to call it that is involved. What the trigger for that is of course part of the big debate, and that big debate still goes on, but there's more to this than just flattened crop. And as the years rolled by, we got into 91, you know, the symbolism was getting ever more complex. People were debating whether they were alien or religious or occult or alchemical or whatever. But certainly geometrically, they were being made with great precision. And the layout of some of these designs, when you apply the inherent geometry on them, shows you that they are not random. They are certainly very precise on many occasions. They embody very complex geometry. It is not something you knock out when you've just fallen out of the pub at midnight. I mean, really, when people say it's drunk young farmers, they've obviously never looked at most of these things. And I've given talks to young farmers before, and they would tell you they couldn't do this at like 7 o'clock in the evening, never mind 3 pints past midnight. So, you know, let's be real about this. Whatever's going on, it's something that likes mathematics and pays attention to detail. And mathematically, of course, you know, we had a very interesting development when the fractal formations began to arrive. Cutting a very long story short, science of chaos theory has discovered fractals, these kind of self-replicating infinite shapes that will emerge when you run or replicate the natural equations of nature using computers. And this shape, the Mandelbrot set, is one of them, and we've seen several fractal forms over the years, which raises the issue that maybe even some of the more complex designs could be natural in origin. And the point here is that you don't need a mind to produce a shape like this, and just thinking of snow crystal, of course, will focus your mind slightly there. So for some, they're natural, but for others, no, there must be intelligence, like Doug and Dave. So others, of course, then decided, well, it must all be a big joke. So in 1991, the big hoax story burst into the press. So two retired gentlemen calling themselves Doug and Dave said, we'd made them all. And newspapers loved this, and it was marvellous. And there was only just one problem with the story, which was that it was bollocks. And the problem, again, was that the perception had been put out there very widely, and most people were happy to accept that, okay, this must be the answer, even though they'd never looked at the evidence themselves. Those who had said, yeah, how do you explain the historical formations? How do you explain the overseas formations? Were they getting on an aeroplane every night? And there were lots of doubts about the origins of Doug and Dave. They made crop circles in front of cameras in the end, and they were terrible, and then they retired. So the fact that the formations didn't go away tells you they were not the originators of it. Now, obviously, other people have come forward and said that they've made them, and nobody would doubt formations can be man-made, and certainly a proportion of them are. Okay, we all know this. But that doesn't necessarily explain the whole thing. There's a field of man-made formations made in 1992 as an experiment. But what we've seen in many of these experiments is you take quite a long time to make these. You need 6 to 9 hours to make some of the more complex designs, and yet some of these have appeared in very short periods of time. Sometimes you can have several major formations in a single night, when you wouldn't even have enough hours of available light to make them if they're taken up to 9 hours to construct. And that's not true for all of them, but it's true for enough of them that you can say it's amazing that although we're now up to something like 7,000 or 8,000 recorded crop circles, no one's ever been definitively caught in the act of making one. And that's really quite something when you think many of these are in fields that are next to roads, that, you know, it's getting busy by 4 in the morning and it's getting light. Why don't we, if they're taking 9 hours to make, wave at these people as we drive by in the morning? And it just doesn't happen. And so, of course, this then sets up a kind of an odd feeling around it, that however many are man-made, there are certain ones that you just can't explain that way. As the years rolled by, they got ever more sophisticated. We got literally astronomical diagrams giving dates and times, seemingly anticipating unpredictable astronomical phenomena. And, you know, just the quality of them was just so outstanding that people were realising that, okay, we're dealing with something really rather special here. And, of course, we're just scratching the surface here. I know many of you have seen these before. But one that attracted a lot of attention, still divides today, is this formation at Stonehenge in 1996. And it appeared in full view of Stonehenge and the A303, which you can just see there. The field tilts visibly down towards the 2. And yet this seems to have arrived within 45 minutes. And if you look at it close up, it's 915 feet long, and it's got 151 circles in it. But we have the Stonehenge staff, the farm manager, and the pilot, who say they know the field was empty all day until at least 5:30 in the afternoon. Shortly after 6 o'clock, there it was. People were seeing it from the road, pulling over, going inside to have a look. The skeptics say that's a lie, and that it was there all day, and nobody saw it all day, until after 6. Well, that's just not 14 times ran a story within the last year, reiterating that debunking story, saying you couldn't see the formation from the road. That's an utter lie, because I was there, and yes, you could easily, and I've got photographs to prove it. And I was going to write to them, and I thought, you know, what is the point? 14 times by just a bunch of debunkers who like to twist the truth, and then they accuse us of twisting the truth. So you just can't win. However, there are several formations that have appeared within these very short periods of time in daylight hours over the years. And the point is, you know, if you need 6 to 9 hours to make something not even a third of that length, how could you work so quickly? And yes, with enough hours, yes, with enough planning, you can replicate some of these designs as has been shown. But boy, it takes some time. And that is what you often don't have available. 97, another fractal form here. It was calculated by a firm of architects in America that if you were going to create this working at night, you would need a week and 3 days. And that might be an overestimate, I think it is, but nonetheless, it goes to show that, you know, there's more to this than just knocking it up in a couple of hours, and when you give people a chance to do that, they never seem to manage. Or at least what they make isn't quite like this. And then when you look at some of the man-made designs, and you get ones like this, it really raises eyebrows. This was made for Mitsubishi, made by some of the same 3 chaps that make many of the television crop circles, and it took them 2 days. In broad daylight, with no need for stealth. They paid the farmer, it was all above board, and that's how long it took. And yet, when you then compare that with other ones that have appeared in very short periods of time, you realise, okay, yes, some are probably man-made, very probably. Some, however, would seem not to be explicable in these terms. And that's why you're all here tonight, because you're still not sure, and that's why the world's still arguing about crop circles, even though we were told it was all solved in 1991 with Doug and Dave. It has not been solved. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of controversy, because of course there is. But then you look at something like this, and you say, well, you know, we are dealing with something special. So this was in 2001, 409 circles, 800 feet in diameter. And, you know, even one of the guys, John Lumberg, who makes television crop circles, conceded you could not make this in one night. And yet it was made in one night, on a night of pouring rain. So, you know, these things do focus the mind somewhat. And then as the years have rolled by, this was in 2004, then you also get the implied messages. Because some say, our crop circle is a message. Well, yes, there have been some that seem more definitely down that road, but most are ambiguous. There was the famous one with the alien and the disc, and it translated as beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, and all of that. But many of them are more implied. This has lots to say about the Wheel of Time, the ancient time cycle. You've got Mayan stuff around the outside, Sumerian, Egyptian on the inside. Many formations have directly referenced the cycle of time that ended and began again on 21st of December 2012. And a lot of people now laugh at the 2012 prophecies because they say, well, the world didn't end and nothing happened. I beg to differ. If you look at how much has changed and accelerated in the world since December 2012, my God, the prophecies were right. Yeah. And if you believe them, you could look forward to more and more and more change and consciousness shift and transformation, of which I would say the Scottish issue is just but a tiny dot that we're dealing with. This is what these times are going to be about. So we're in the new era. Many crop circles have spoken about it. So it wasn't the end of the world, it was the beginning of a new one. And, you know, we've got a long way to go, I'm sure. However, the newspapers love to tell you it's all a load of rubbish, number one, or number two, it's not there anymore. I mean, in 2006, that was when they started to run this story. They like to run every 2 or 3 years now, saying crop circles are disappearing, fallen victim to a serial killer, boom, boom. And, you know, this is a good example of the press lying. It's not a mistake, it's not an error, it's a lie. Because today, you say, how many crop circles are there this year? Oh, I know, I'll look at that thing called the internet. And then you look and you go, okay, there's lots actually. Why can't journalists do that? But no, they keep running these stories, and last year they ran the same story, even though we had quite a few rather good formations. But no, they didn't report then. They just said, oh, no, it's all finished. So you're being lied to. We know we're lied to by the media, but I think it's fascinating that with crop circles, you can demonstrate it categorically that we're lied to about something as seemingly light as this. So then you can assume you're being lied to about everything else as well, which of course we are. Life forms in 2009, we had jellyfish and dragonflies and birds and extinct species like trilobites. And some felt they were trying to make a point. Nature is in trouble, in case you hadn't noticed. And some felt that it was drawing our attention back to things like this. But then they went back to abstraction in 2010, and we just sometimes just getting fascinating examples of just fantastic design, implying three-dimensional form by very cleverly having cross-hatched some areas to give light and shade. And as we got to 2012, that was a bumper year. We had lots of formations, and that was the year that all the prophecies had been bubbling around, and we had fascinating things like this. And that's where you begin to realise, well, there's something about these things that speaks to people. So the world didn't end at the end of that year, but, they had raised awareness for a lot of people just to be ready for change. And if you were concentrating, hopefully you'll get through the years ahead better than some people will, because you had a little heads up in the fields. And so to last year, these didn't exist according to the press. No, these had already all appeared and more, but they didn't exist apparently, because then the press said there aren't any circles, and they showed very deceptively a couple of pictures of a couple of really scrappy ones saying that was all there was. So they're just lying through the teeth. And so the theories, very briefly, you know most of them. Some say they're extraterrestrial. The small lights get seen, but larger objects have been seen over the fields too. If it is some kind of like intervention from an intelligence outside, what is it? It's not a message per se, but maybe it's subliminal encoded information designed just to nudge us in the ribs and wake us up, perhaps. And yet, crop circle distribution around the world is rather patchy. We'll see what's been going on around the world later on tonight. But it's interesting how some countries get lots and others get none or very few. And we're living in England, so we're living in crop circle central. More here than any other country. But we're not alone. And as you'll see later, other countries are getting some extraordinary stuff as well. But that does suggest that they can't just work anywhere. Some countries get hardly any, and there's certainly a feeling that maybe there's some other factor at work. And the most likely factor is geology. Here's a map of the epicentre of British crop circle activity, i.e. southern England. These red dots show you where areas of lots of crop circles have clustered. And the green underneath them is showing you the main regions of chalk. And can you see how it's clearly following the chalk? You've got counties here, here, here and here full of fields that don't get crop circles, or very few. So there's something geological going on here, and of course chalk is a very good aquifer to carry out water, and it may well be that underground water, perhaps generating natural electrical effects and all of this kind of thing, is a factor. So that doesn't rule out other intelligence, but certainly there seems to be a geophysical dimension to this as well. As of course the Dowsers, and here's a great late David Russell here, bless his soul, the Dowsers, who of course pointed out years ago that crop circles always seem to appear near strong underground water sources. And they of course believe that they can detect natural energies, ley lines, energy lines. We've got several Dowsers here tonight, I know. So, you know, for many this is partly at least geophysical. It's maybe the Earth speaking. It's maybe that the circles are a symptom of change. There's lots of change going on. There's climate change of some kind occurring, whatever does or doesn't contribute to it, and as we know, there's many arguments about that and how it's represented. But there are big changes going on, for instance, in the magnetic realms. The Earth's magnetic field is lower than it's been in recorded history. And no one's quite sure why, but it's very likely something to do with wider cycles of the sun. And the sun's broken records for all kinds of activity over the last 25 years or so, and yet suddenly it's gone very quiet. There's something that maybe the ancient time cycle, which by the way was 5,125 years, may refer to a wider cycle of the sun. And it's worth noting over the years how many crop circles seem to have shown us solar flares or the magnetic fields of the sun and the earth, as if it's trying to draw attention to the fact that perhaps we need to wake up and be more aware of what's going on in our celestial neighbourhood, because we are at the mercy of cycles, and yet some say that it could be that very cycle that kick-starts the next phase of our evolution. Let's hope so, eh? On the other hand, you can just go to sleep and have a laugh when you're in crop circles and forget all of this. But I'll just use this to illustrate that. Of course, some people believe psychic forces are involved. Some of us in Sussex were ourselves involved years ago. We're trying to see if we could contact whatever was making this, to see if we could get crop circles to appear, predict where and when they were going to appear, and we felt we had some success. And others over the years have done this experiment where they go into a room and they shut the door and you decide what crop circle you wish to appear. You choose a design. And lo and behold, often, after you've meditated on it, or while people are, and visualising these shapes appear, lo and behold, they appear. And we had a couple of instances of this. That was at Felbridge, near East Grinstead in '95. That was at Sisbury Ring. And the work that we did with Paul Bura, the late great Paul Bura, convinced us at least that whatever else is going on, right, there is an interactive quality. And lots of other groups have come to the same conclusion, that maybe the collective mind is somehow speaking through this phenomenon, whatever else may be occurring. It's another thought. So, you know, beyond that, you just make your mind, is it rutting deer, is it hedgehogs? Honestly, the papers tell us this, or is it God? And some believe, honestly, and who can say they're wrong, that they might even be divine interventions. We'd be here all day if we went through all the theories. So there we go. That's a resume of basically where we've got to. So in other words, cutting a long story short, we began not knowing what the hell was going on. And here today, we don't know what the hell's going on. But they still keep our attention. They still keep coming back. And in a way I've spoiled you there, because I put together some of the best there. But when you look at a year's worth of formations, you'll see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what we're going to do today is just completely non-selectively show you chronologically what's been going on in the UK. And then we'll take the best from around the world. Because I think the fact that the UK is the centre point of this phenomenon, well, it tells you something. And I think what it tells you is that whether it's our mindset, whether it's our geology or what, we have somehow been selected as the centre of this. Or maybe it's just because we're so great here. I don't know. But we are the centre of it. Isn't that amazing? Even though it is a global phenomenon. So, the fact is that we therefore should look carefully at everything that we get. And that's what we're going to do. In showing you this, I am not saying to you that they are man-made or not man-made or anything. I might express an opinion if I think something really stands out. But as ever, you must make up your minds how you feel in your gut about where they come from. I cannot tell you, unless you're standing there when these things appear. You either see it appearing metaphysically or somebody making it. Unless you were there, you cannot be sure. And that's why many of these claims that they're all man-made is hot air, because how can they prove that? But equally say they're all made by aliens, and it's also hot air. We don't know. But if they speak to you, that's what matters. So, let's see where we started. And I have to say, it didn't really start off very promisingly. But we got this scratchy, funny little weird thing. But the good news about it was that it appeared in April. Last year we had to wait to June before we had a single formation. But this began pretty much around the date that it normally would have a good year. So that boded well. So here we are, 16th of April, Wootton Rivers in Wiltshire. And I mean, you know, you very rarely start with your best formation. Something that's a bit of a scratchy joke. But anyway, but it would soon pick up. So the first of them, the more, shall we say, proper formations, arrived in Dorset at Irwin Minster on 23rd of April. So Dorset, over the years, has had a number of formations, but it's not really a central area for it. But what we saw this year was a reactivation of certain places that have had circles before, and yet have been pretty quiet. Last year, most of the activity was in Wiltshire. But this year, it almost reversed for a while, although Wiltshire would eventually get its fair share. But it seemed to move out to the provinces. And there may be reasons for that. I mean, it's not helped by the fact that the farmers in Wiltshire, who are now sick of getting so many crop circles, of course, and hundreds of people wanted to go into the fields, they got very hostile. They won't let people in. They've been cutting formations down as soon as they begin to appear, or, you know, as soon as they've arrived. And it's got nasty, and it's almost as if the phenomenon's noted that, thought, oh, all right, we'll just leave them alone for a little while, and we'll go out and annoy other farmers instead. So other counties had a lot this year, but in the end they would just think, oh, what the hell, and they go back to Wiltshire as well. But anyway, so here we are, Dorset, 23rd of April, so oilseed rape, of course. Not an easy crop to work with. I know some of you have heard me say this for years, but just for those of you that don't know, a stalk is like celery. And yet we've found over the years 90-degree bends. Now you get a bit of oilseed rape and you try and bend a 90-degree bend without snapping it, and you'll struggle. And yet we've seen that over the years. Can't vouch for this one, but it is a very difficult medium to flatten without damaging it. So then we start to get to something more like we'd kind of expect at this time of the year, 26th of May, in the early barley here. So this is Pebworth in Worcestershire. Worcestershire's had crop circles before, certainly not a central region for it, but so, you know, it was looking certainly like, okay, well, we need to look beyond the normal catchment area here to see what's going on. And then Sussex gets a circle, well about time too. I mean, really, now some of you may not know this, right? So here we are, Falmer, near Brighton, 30th of May. Okay. It's old style, although no, and we didn't note at the time, we couldn't quite tell, but look, two tiny little baby circles, grape shot circles as people used to call them. Back in the day, back in the mid-90s, or that, we were getting 15, 16 formations a year in Sussex, east and west. And then it's just like they've just sort of died off. Like other counties, it's like, okay, you've had your share. And we hadn't had one in Sussex for, well, 3 or 4 years. And even the one that we had before, we only found out about it after the fact. So there was a mini revival this year, as you'll see. There were 2 more in Sussex. So, let's have a look at this. Richard Martin managed to get in and have a quick look. If I can get on. That might be your head, madam, I'm so sorry. Yes, it is. There we are. So, here is what it looked like from the nearby pathway, and it's a classic circle, and you saw earlier on that once upon a time this was what we had. We had circles, and strange though it may seem to you now, people got very excited about just circles. That was all there was, and it was mysterious, and it's quite nice to just get a circle. There's a purity to it. And it's in barley, and barley never flattens very much. It's very springy, it just seems to, you know, just flop around, but it looks very beautiful. So, you can see here that it's taking us right back in time, you know, to how this would have been in the early days for people like Colin Andrews and that. The centre looks nice. It's kind of in a barley, sort of shaggy way. It's not the neatest, but you can see something going on there, and then you can see this sort of little knot, this twist at the centre there. So that was rather nice to think, hey, we've been remembered at last. So now, what would we get? Well, it wasn't going back quite to days of yore, but certainly it wasn't the end, as you shall see. Okay, and one more thing to say is, it's interesting, isn't it, how a lot of people have often remarked that the football stadium at Falmouth looks like a flying saucer's landed in that. And now we had a circle to go with it, which seemed rather apt. So there we go.
Is that where Brighton?
It is. Any Brighton supporters here? Oh, right. Come on. Sorry, well, it doesn't matter, does it? No. Yes, is the answer. That's their spanking new stadium. Well, 5 years, 6 years, and a new relative history. Okay, right, let's go back to Dorset. So, on the 1st of June, on Hill, in Hanford, we have this. I like this because there's kind of a purity to it. It's almost like a draftsman's drawing of a formation before they filled it all in. And then they thought, yeah, but that just looks nice like that. We'll leave it like that. So I think that's rather sweet. And it's not that common to get squares. I mean, it looks like a diamond here, but I think it is effectively, well, or rectangular when you look at it directly overhead. So Dorset certainly had activity this year, and more to come. And then Hampshire. At Chilcombe Down, we have this odd formation, really. What's going on here? So now, if anybody's into the digital world, maybe this is some kind of code, I'm not sure, but these like dog-bone things, it sort of gives you the feeling that there's something here you're meant to decode, which we have had before in formations. Nice to see a spiral. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to walk a spiral, and there's a nice thin, neat spiral there. Hampshire, long ago, was the centre of the crop circle world. We all think Wiltshire always was. No, it wasn't. It was Hampshire. You go back to the 70s and the 80s, you look at the work of Papdale Gardown, Colin Andrews, Hampshire was the place. And then somehow, about 1990, it kind of transferred to Wiltshire. Didn't mean Wiltshire had never had them, but that wasn't the most common area. And now it tends to be Wiltshire. But this year, Hampshire had a few again. So it comes and goes in Hampshire now. And that was the first of this year's there. So then we start to get the kind of quality stuff that, you know, really strikes you because it's just such a great piece of design. So simple, so beautiful, but you kind of got, you know, the pentagram and the pentagon and the circle. It is so straightforward and yet it is so powerful. Again, Worcestershire, 14th of June, and Bestford. So, you know, this is the kind of stuff that people get excited by. I think because there's just something very geometrically harmonious about it. It's very clear, it's very sort of powerful. And these shapes do something to people. I mean, I think that's the thing, that whatever the intention, whatever realm they come from, shape, colour often, even just the colour of the crop, you know, it speaks to people on a heart level, whatever else it's meant to do. And things like that certainly do it. Okay, in Essex, on 14th of June, near Southend-on-Sea, we had the first of a flurry of Essex formations. Now, I mean, Essex went bonkers at the end of the season, which you will shortly see. But it started off with this one. It's had formations before, not unheard of there, but it's certainly not been that activated in recent times. So this was nice to see one there. But yes, in the end, it would effectively take over as the centre of all activity by the end of the season. Okay, a striking and strange 17th of June, Badbury Rings, ancient site, of course, near Wimborne in Dorset. And it's kind of a hodgepodge of so many things, but there's something very striking about that. Ancient sites, of course, often seem to attract crop circles. There is the belief of some that the earth energies in the ground were, of course, the very thing that might have attracted ancient people to those places in the first place. And they marked them with stones and barrows. And, of course, if crop circles are utilising that same energy, call it what you want to call it, it stands to reason that they would all cluster in those similar areas. Some even believe crop circles may have appeared in prehistoric times, and ancient man, seeing them, thought, well, the gods have arrived, and marked them with stones. Now, that's only a theory. It's a nice theory, isn't it? And not impossible. When you look at some of the petroglyphs that are carved and that from ancient times, many of them are very like crop circles. So finally, Wiltshire activates properly. So 20th of June, whatever had been holding back at that point thought, oh, Alton Barnes! We haven't been to Alton Barnes for a while, have we? I mean, if you don't know, Alton Barnes used to be absolutely the main spot for them, and it is really. And so it went, okay, we'll give them something. And it's not the best of the Alton Barnes formations, but, you know, it's there. And so people thought, aha. So, of course, farmers immediately said, right, go away, don't come and visit. And now, when you start looking at some of the crop circle websites, you know, you get sort of these crop circle access notice saying the farmer is giving no access. Now, you know, this is difficult because, of course, we want to see them, we want to look at them. The difficulty is, I think, the hostility's got so great this year that what we've found is so many people are saying, well, yeah, but if you're telling me I can't even go near the field, sod you, and they're going in anyway and maybe causing more damage because they're not going in an official path. So I'm not sure it's not counterproductive, but there we are, we shall see. Another very nice formation, back in Hampshire again, at Popham, not too far from the airfield there. 21st of June, solstice. So this again is one of those rather nice formations. It looks like a Christmas star or something. You know, looks three-dimensional with the shiny sides to it. And it's not the hugest of formations, but often the neatest ones can be small. But then classic design, ring circles. Again, this is something you would expect to see back in the 1980s. It's still arriving now, 22nd of June, right next to the long barrow. Now, a little bit later, and I won't show it because it basically A, looked the same, and B, there's no photograph of it properly that we know, an almost identical formation appeared. But it's got confused because on some of the websites, they show this photo again as if it's showing the other formation, whereas they just used that picture to show you what they thought the next formation looked like. So anyway, it's all got rather confused. So we'll just show this one tonight, but there was apparently a duplicate appeared in the same field a little bit later on, but there is some confusion about that. Okay, back to Essex. So we get this bizarre design, this diamond. So back at Southend on the 22nd of June, we have this. I mean, you know, that ring is more than what you think it is. If you look carefully, look, it's a crescent. Really, really thin path down there, it widens out beautifully. I mean, this is a real work of art. And again, sometimes with these formations, you need to look a little bit more closely to appreciate what's gone on here. They might look straightforward, but when you start to just sit and look at them for a while, you realise there's more going on. And that's certainly the case with this central area here. And it's worth seeing a close-up shot there. So there's a lot of texturing. You've got obviously a sort of a knotted, tufty bit in the middle there, then a circle. But look, this beautiful flow of crop going in and out and all weaving together. And that's right, you're right actually, yes. So there you go, the more you look at these things, the more you see. You know, it's not just crop that's been knocked down in a hurry. You know, you've got qualities which are clearly being taken care of. You know, it's not just crudely smashed down. Okay, this is a bit odd. So back at West Kennet, on the 24th of June, we had this. Now, I'm presuming somebody did that later. But I don't know, I've not seen a picture of it without that. It looks a bit crude and nasty and isn't so different from the entry path as someone's crushed down there. But I don't know, but certainly, you know, this is getting right back to basics in a ring in a field. And talking of rings and fields, then at Hackpen Hill, sort of a little bit north of Avebury. We had this on 26th of June, again, kind of thing you would have expected some years ago. So we're still getting echoes of earlier times. This is sort of another symptom of what was going on in Wiltshire this year, so 29th of June. This appeared, but none of the websites will tell you where it is. And I really want to know why, because I don't like that. Because I'm imagining, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm imagining the farmer was really angry that this had appeared on his land. So he just said, I do not want this reported. But hang on a minute, the farmers can't tell you not to say that something's there. You can tell people not to go in. But if we start colluding with that, you're going to find in 2 or 3 years' time you won't know where any of these are. And bless farmers, I know they have a hard time sometimes, but I think that goes too far. You can say don't go in, you're not welcome, but to not tell us anywhere in Wiltshire where it is seems to me out of order. And what's going to happen in the future is it's going to get harder and harder to find out where these things are. And my personal feeling is the Circle website should not go along with this. But, you know, there are going to be arguments about that clearly. But unfortunately, at the same time, I recognise that's the kind of difficult situation that now exists in Wiltshire. Okay, however, Dorset produces another very interesting design, so sixpenny handley, what a great name. 29th of June, with a burst of crescents and stars and circles, you know, really lovely stuff going on there. And this wouldn't be the last of the formations in this area. You see, there's another one. A phenomenon we've noticed over the years, and I think this would have been there before the formation arrived. I mean, you obviously, for those of you that haven't clicked, but it's amazing that not everybody does, these dark lines going across are tractor lines. They're in most British fields, not all, but most. But if you look, and you see, you've got these little tyre tracks that have gone all over that field. Did they arrive? Was it somebody drove in to look at the formation? That has been known, by the way. People drive into the middle of the circle and then wonder why the farmer gets annoyed. Anyway, but so I'm not quite sure what those paths are about, but here it is. But yeah, great formation, very nice. Sussex! Yay! 3rd of July, Wilmington. And that's the Wilmington near the Longman. So, here we have, I would say, the most complex design we've had in Sussex for quite some years. And what I think is curious here is that this is not a Sussex style. It's visiting. This is something that's obviously thinking, I can't get away with this in Wiltshire at the moment. I know what, we'll give them this kind of symbolism in Sussex instead. It's quite reminiscent of a formation from last year near Stonehenge, which you can see. It's not quite the same, but it's utilising the same kind of feeling. It's kind of a sequel to that, of these kind of gradually expanding, well, you've got all their pentagons, rings and everything. So, you know, it has a feeling here of a visiting style. It's certainly not native to Wilmington. It's not the first time Wilmington's had formations. The last time we had one was back in 1995, which was right at the foot of the Longman. This was a bit far away from the Longman. You could see it. There's the Longman over there looking across the field. But and this field's been visited itself back in 1991. It's had formations here before, but this is what we had this year. So it's worth noting that the curve that farmers in Wiltshire have taken 20 years to do took the farmer in Wilmington about a week to do. So at first he actually was tolerant of people going in, and the result was that within about 2 days, several thousand people had been inside this formation, which was when he got another formation, you'll see shortly. He said that's it, and he went and he chopped it down within hours of its appearance. So he unfortunately realised suddenly the impact of getting the formation on his land. Here's some shots taken inside. I know some of you here. How many people managed to see this in this room? 4 or 5 of you. Okay. So there we are. So we have to make the most these days. And it's lovely to see them back in Sussex. There's just the long man over there. By the way, I often keep reading reports saying, oh, the ancient long man, Iron Age. There's no proof of that at all. But the earliest account of the long man, I think, is something like 1700. It doesn't mean it isn't earlier, but it's certainly not proven. There's many arguments. Some think the long man's much more recent. And he certainly didn't look like he looks like today. They've changed in the feet, are at different angles now. But who cares? It's a marvellous piece of art nonetheless. Very nice swirls in this formation. By the time I got in to take these pictures, it had been well trampled, unfortunately. But there was a lot of sense of motion and movement there. And I mean, this is the thing. When you get the chance to spend time, you begin to understand how they work, however it's done. And like when you get tapering, how the crops of the rushes together, and then it's rather beautiful sometimes the way it just fills out. And it's not obvious, it's not as you necessarily would think that it would be done. And sometimes these can taper down almost eventually to one stem's width. There's a real finesse going on here. And talking of stems, one bit I noticed here was at the tip of one of the sides. There's stems that obviously have never gone down, and stuff's gone down around it, which is something we've seen before, but it was just nice to see another example of that there. And it's just inside one of the paths there. So it was nice, a nice formation. Very good. More, please. We look forward to that next year, whoever is listening. Okay, 8th of July, Hackman Hill again. Now, many of you will know some formations don't stay the same. So this is kind of quite naive art, isn't it? And it looks a bit sort of crap, really, around the edge. You think, oh, well, that's all a bit, irregular. And yet, that's sort of the very thing that I quite like about it. Anyway, however, in the way of these things, often you'll get formations where they'll get added to or changed. This decided to transform, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get your head again. Oh, lovely, thanks so much. And later it turned into this. So there we are. So suddenly it changed, and then it made sense almost. There's something about the moon face and this kind of naive art style that kind of clicks, even though critics would say it's just poorly constructed, which it might be, but it kind of works. I like it as a piece of design. It's very attractive. Okay, another nice formation back in Wiltshire at Charlton, 8th of July. We have this, and this is the kind of stuff that, I don't know why, but people perk up with this. The oddities, they're a bit less sure of going for them, but once like this, it's like, yes, geometrical splendour. And here we go, here's the other Wilmington formation, so on the 9th of July. It's the only photo I've seen of it, I never saw it. It's obviously very early morning, this arrived, it's like some kind of Celtic cross design. And if you want to know where it was, if you were looking at the long man would be over there, and it was just to the left of the long man. But the farmer had had enough, and he went straight out, and down it came. So sadly, that's all we've got. We've got this one shot. I don't even know who took this shot, but somebody managed to see it. So there we go. So we're going to get down there very quickly next year if we do start getting any more.
How do you find out about them?
How do you find out about them? Well, I only found out about that after the fact, and it was just reporters having been cut down. You just have to hope somebody in the locale gets onto the internet really quickly. I mean, in Wiltshire, obviously, some people fly over them, and they're looking for them, and they'll find them first thing in the morning, and then we'll know. But sometimes, you like with that one, you just don't know till after the fact. So there we are. Okay, here we are, Gloucestershire. I've had a few over the years, not a main place, but this is what we had at Rockmartin. And I would say that kind of continues that slightly naive art style, albeit in a very slightly different way. But I kind of quite like that. It's like a kid's drawing of a flower, but in a kind of a nice way. This, though, is something else. I think this is fantastic. So here we are, Marlborough, 16th of July. And every year, you kind of think, they've done it all now. But they'll always come up with something you didn't expect. This is just fantastic. So you've got a spiral, but it's made out of these little standing circles, standing tufts. And it's not the neatest formation I've ever seen. It's just, you actually look at what's involved there. I don't know, it's good. This is a really nice piece of design. And I mean, now, you can argue over this. You can clearly see there's some kind of grid has gone down around which this has been made. Now, the sceptic would instantly say, oh, well, that's because they made the grid and blah, blah, blah. But there have been observations over the years that the other phenomenon, whatever it may be, does lay down tracer paths as part of what it does. I would refer you to the work of Michael Glickman about that, who did some very good research into that. And you can argue it both ways, because some of the lines, some formations, would be easier to make without the lines. So it's a curious thing. But this, I still think, is, yeah, really quite something. Fantastic. And here's a real biggie. So Essex, again, 17th of July, Roydon in Essex. We have the really long pictogram. I'm presuming that's a footpath that goes through the field there. But anyway, here we go. So Essex really was activating big time, and it wasn't done yet. Not a great photo, all I've seen of it. Down in Totnes, Devon, Lower Borden, 18th of July. As far as we can see, they're a single circle. So I can tell you no more. But Devon has had a few formations over the years down that way. Not a hot spot, but it's nice to see one there. Again, bit of an oddity, Northamptonshire, Lilbourne, 21st of July. Just this little dumbbell with, if you look, you've got these, the two rectangular boxes either side, which is something we used to see right back in the early 1990s. You don't really see them very often now, so that is a direct harking back to earlier years. Sorry. Okay, so this is curious, isn't it? So back to Gloucestershire again, to Barnsley, which I presume is not the Barnsley in Yorkshire, obviously. So 22nd of July. Yeah, it's just kind of strange, isn't it? But, as you probably spotted already, if you look at the circle itself, this was the first of one or two that we had this year that utilised the so-called basket weave effect. So you can see here that, you know, it's got that crisscrossing checkerboard lay that we first saw in a formation, I've forgotten what year it was now, sometime in the kind of late 90s. And every now and then it comes back, and it's really rather a nice way to texture a formation, but we'll see there's some more of that later this year. Okay, Essex again. So suddenly Essex is putting itself really on the map here. 24th of July, Sutton Hall in Rochford. Speaks for itself really. It, you know, has something in common symbolically with some of the other stuff that's been going on there, but big formation, nice picture. So, okay, another basket weave formation. So at Wellington in Gloucestershire, 26th of July. Again, you've got crisscrossing stuff going on here. I think I can see this more. Can you see? Yes, there we are. So nice. I mean, clearly a ring's gone down. So a ring's gone down, and then the centre's been filled with the basket weave. So I think there's yet more of that. Hmm? Yeah, it's like a stencil. I know what you're saying. Right, 27th of July, Etchelhampton, Wiltshire. We had this. In fact, Etchelhampton Hill was the only place where we had, I think, a friendly farmer in Wiltshire. And last year he was actually all right about letting people in. And this year was the only place you can get into a formation, I think, officially. So here we go. This is, yeah, quite like that, really. Not much to say, but nice. Here is something that you might or might not be able to see at the back, has more to it than meets the eye. So 27th of July, again, Charrington in Gloucestershire. So you've got this really weird ring, it's like some digital type thing, I don't know, it reminds me of something, I'm not sure what, some kind of grid going on. But of course, and you at the front can see this, you've got incredible texturing going on in that central circle. And there. So you can see you've got a pentagram, and you've got swirls within each point of the pentagram, you've got basket weave, lovely central circle. So it's beautiful, isn't it? It's like icing on a cake, or, you know, real fluid dynamics going on there. Really quite beautiful. Can we get in even closer? Yes, we can. So there we go. Look at that as well. So it's just a real sense of motion. It's often said in crop circles that it's like water flowing, and this really has that sense in this formation. Very nice. Full marks. Okay, Avebury. Well, you know, Avebury's been so much the centre of so much circle activity over the years. 29th of July. What can I say? It's there, and again, you know, it was like, okay, Wiltshire's, it's not done, it's still bubbling away there somewhere. And, well, we've certainly had bigger and more complex designs there over the years, but it's alright. It's quite sweet, isn't it? This is kind of really bizarre. Back in Devizes, Roundway, Devizes, Wiltshire, 30th of July. It's kind of everything, isn't it? It's obviously like a child alien thinking, oh, what shall I create today? Oh, I'll add that bit there, and I'll put that little bit there. Oh, that's nice. It's sort of rubbish, but I really like it. You know what I mean? It's nice. There's something quite sweet about it. I like this bit. We've had this over the years, well, these little sort of question mark type things. I haven't seen them for a few years, so that's the first time we've seen that in a little while. Another one that has more than meets the eye, Titchbourne in Hampshire, 4th of August. So apparently just a ringed circle, but of course in the middle we can see there's rather more going on. And there you can see inside, so you've got this petals, very elongated petals there, again with the basket weed. So it's not so pronounced in this formation, but you know, it's just a little added extra. And a lot of people don't even notice it. You just glancing through the pictures, you think, oh, that's a boring one, but you look in a little bit more, and there's so much more going on. Okay, East Kennet again, 5th of August. By the way, there's some arguments about how you spell Kennet. Some say it's double T, some say it's single T, some say it's single N, and the road signs don't help you because they're inconsistent as well when you're there. Anyway, I've gone for both doubles here, so if that offends anybody, I'm sorry. Anyway, here we go, East Kennet, it's 5th of August. It's quite nice. Again, if you look carefully here, you'll see you basically, there's a kind of ring on down here, and then the crop's flowing across, basically straight. You see that? So it's laid in effectively straight lines there. And there's texturing and stuff going on in every corner of that. So again, there's far more than may at first meet the eye. Rather strange little thing here, 6th of August, East Kennet again. So you've got a slightly jagged circle, and then I don't know what you call that, kind of that's bitten off the circle. It's kind of, you think, I mean, what I think about this is, for those that say it's all man-made a big joke, you think, why? Actually, I could make something better than that, and yet something chose to do this funny shape here. Which probably was quite an effort to make it that funny shape. You know, but it would be easy to make a little pictogram or something. So, you know, the mindset here is a funny thing. Okay, Hackman Hill, Wiltshire, 6th of August. So, you know, you've got a kind of a basket weave thing going on here, and then little tufts, little dotty bits left standing up. I imagine somebody's walked through there to have a look. Shame on them. And we can see where this sat in relation to, to that moon face one. You can just see that up there. So there we are. So it's in the same field, tucked away, albeit on a slightly different scale. Actually, Avebury again on the 8th of August. I mean, you can probably see here again, there's a lot of texturing going on here. I'll show you the centre because it's worth a look here. So you've got a lot of nice stuff going on there, and the way the centre's coming in is really beautiful. So you've literally, so you've got a ring there, and then crop has been swept inwards into this big heap in the middle, like an old-fashioned haystack. We've seen that before, but it's really nice. That's cascade of crop just flying into the centre. And we can just see a little bit of detail of some of the basket weavy stuff there going on. So criss-cross, nice. Sorry. Okay, well, a ring circle, but wow, look at the size of that ring around the circle. I mean, the thing is, this is Mixon, Etcherhampton, 12th of August. Now, I mean, again, people say, oh, well, easy, anybody can make a circle and a ring. It's not easy. I mean, I remember when we used to be, you know, out there, when we had lots of circles in the mid-90s, myself and Barry and Martin and the team used to go out there with tape measures, and something like this, that's quite a wide diameter, you've got formation sometimes several hundred feet. You even draw a tape measure out from the centre, holding that taut and keeping it straight and walking in a neat circle is really not easy. There's so much tension on it. And when people say, oh, well, they just walk around with the rope, like that's the easiest thing in the world to do, it's not that easy. I mean, maybe they did, but they did it bloody well if they did. It's not straightforward. You get out there in the fields, you get a different feel for this kind of thing, and carrying tape measures around is something worth doing. So, look at this, isn't this lovely? 13th of August, Gustage St Andrew. What a great name. We're going to say it again. Gustage St Andrew, Dorset. I think that's got to be one of the nicest formations of the year. It's partly just because it's so unashamedly busy. Now, I have heard some people call these bits caduceus, and then somebody said, nah, it's a sine wave, which is actually possibly more accurate, because there should be two snakes otherwise. But it's got everything in there, hasn't it, really? It sings, it's nice, it's beautiful, it's busy, but yeah, it's good. Lovely stuff. So Dorset, yeah, it's really been coming up with the goods this year. Right, very hard to really see what's going on here, but it's the only pictures we've seen. Port Hill, Lesbury, Northumberland. So you don't get many up there, but occasionally you do, 15th of August. It didn't last long, the farmer came in and he chopped it out. And so here you can see he's chopped it out. Now, the thinking is, if you do that, and this is what a lot of the Wiltshire farmers think, there'll be nothing to see and people won't want to come into the field. I argue differently, because actually it makes it stand out more from a distance. You go, oh, what's that? So you go down, you have a look, and you go in, what's this big strange patch? So I'm not sure it works. I think it's a false economy personally, but there we go. So Northumberland, even Northumberland gets formations sometimes. So, Anstey, Warwickshire, 16th of August. Warwickshire's been really quite busy over the last few years. This year it got one, but it was a good one. And for those of you who are interested in conspiracy theory, a lot of speculation about the all-seeing eye here. It's not the greatest, clearest picture I've seen of it, but we'll get in more closely in a minute. Say again? Oh, right, near a golf club. The Belfry. Is that where a lot of high flyers meet?
Yeah.
Bilderberg's be there next week. Anyway, so you've got the eye symbolism possibly, but it's really busy and interesting, and it's really worth zooming in here. We go in here. So here's the eye. Now, so you've got this incredible radiating stuff going on. And we used to get that quite a bit. We haven't had much the last few years, but look at the way this is all laid. So we can see it further, more closely, don't worry, no more to come. That eye is a real masterpiece. So obviously, again, so you've got crops sweeping around the edge. Then I would argue that then the ring is left standing up by whatever process of doing this. Okay, just looking at the order of it, you make up your own minds. A ring is standing up, and then it's swept in. But then it's swept in over a bit that's gone round into this kind of. So it leaves a hole in the middle. You get this sculpted sort of effect sometimes where there's literally a kind of hole you can stick your arm in at the centre. And you can see that going on more clearly there. So, you know, in terms of the lay and the formation, this has got to win one of the awards, I think, this year. Really fantastic stuff going on there. So there we are. And again, it's sort of... I would argue that this year didn't necessarily see a kind of a glut of masterpieces, but there was enough good stuff going on that, you know, you can say there's something holding the fort.
That eye's got a small swirl beside it, which isn't like an eye. If you go to the picture...
Want me to go back?
Yeah.
Sorry, madam, I'm so sorry. There we go. Can you see it there? What, here?
Yeah.
And then you've got that bit there, yes. And I can't see, it looks to me like somebody's laid stones in there. I could be wrong. That's probably done by somebody afterwards. They often make little votive offerings and stuff and make little shrines, which is quite sweet. The farmers hate it, because when they come over the combines, of course it wrecks the place. That's why they don't like people like us very much, I'm afraid. So maybe don't leave the stones in. Right, make fish bones maybe. Again, sixpenny handlet, Dorset, 22nd of August. So, do you know what it is? It's got that sort of fish bony look to it, hasn't it? You know, loaves and fishes maybe. Religious motive, potentially. And it's worth seeing where this is in the landscape. It's right next to a load of burial mounds and barrows, so look at that. All that going up there. So yes, nice just to, often when you then see where they are, you realise they're kind of in harmony with other things that are in the landscape. So back to Essex, and we get a final burst in Essex here, 24th of August, Stroud Green. So it starts with this, and its final little burst, and then the rest of the country at this point goes quiet, and it says, you know, Essex, we concede, you should carry on, Essex. And it does. And so we get sort of nice present-y formation here. And just this is when the field's coming down fast now. And then we get another one up the road, Stroud Green again, 29th of August, so we get this kind of lattice work, this sort of framework type thing. And it thinks, oh, that's good. And we're the only place still got any field standing up still, so you know what, we'll keep going. So we get more. So we get this kind of pentagram type thing again, Stroud Green, 31st of August. And then he obviously thought, oh, it'd be nice to get something in September, wouldn't it? So when we get into early September, we finally get the last bit there. So next to that one, we're a little pictogram there. Well, little, you know, inverted commas. 3rd of September. And that, to date, is the last UK formation that I know of. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the last, because the maize is still up. You get formations in maize, sometimes there's a few crops around, so we could yet be surprised. But to date, this is what we've got. Now, I would argue, we're not finished yet because we haven't seen the rest of the world, but I would argue it's been a good year. It's been a consolidation year. So last year was just survival. If you believe in interactive consciousness and everything, the 2012 build-up, people had great expectations, and then it was like, oh, now what? And then whatever it is that feeds into this, it all seemed to, it was there, as you saw, but it kind of just went a bit quiet, and now it's like, yeah, but hey, we don't need all this 2012 stuff to propel us forward. We don't need a big day. People need these things. Because here's the thing, they still speak to people. The fact you're here, I mean, you know, how many of you are here this evening? There's something about them that makes people ask questions, and it pulls them out of themselves, and regardless of their source, it sort of wakes up that questioning process where you then begin to reevaluate everything that's going on in your life. For a lot of people. And it still does that, even for new people. So some of the old crop circle researchers, and they're kind of a bit long in the tooth, they huff and puff about the golden age. When was the golden age, really? This is a golden age still, I think. You know, we're getting marvellous stuff. And it's speaking to new people. So we respond, we need them. And of course, it's not just here. So what about the rest of the world? So, we could go through every one, but we'd be there all day. I have to say, in general, we do tend to get the best, though, as you will see, not always. Again, what's that about? Is it about energy? Is it about consciousness? Have we just got better circle makers with planks? To know. But there's something to the notion that we also see the same thing at work in different parts of the world, as you will quickly see. But sometimes they're scrappier, sometimes they're more odd, but nonetheless they're there, and they speak to people in those locations. So, the other country that was busiest this year was the Netherlands, and it's controversial. And I'm very loath to almost say anything here because it is so controversial. So they've had a lot of stuff. They've had about 16 or 17 formations this year. And they're kind of funny little things. This, in fact, was the first one of the year, I think. Certainly the first one of the season. There's one we heard about in January, but I've seen no photographs to prove that. The first photo we got from this year is this in March. This was, I think, something like 17th of March. And the problem we've got is that most of them are appearing in the locale where a psychic guy called Robert van der Broek lives. Robert is either the most amazing man in the world or the biggest fraud in the world, depending on who you believe. And it's difficult, because there are researchers like Nancy Talbot of the BLT Research Group in America who's done fantastic work. She used to work with Levengood, is 100% convinced this guy's for real. But he says he witnesses many of these appearing. He always seems to know where they're going to be, and he's there, and he's got incredible tales of things that have happened, but nobody else ever backs this up. There's no evidence. We're asked to take his word for it. And of course, what's happening is increasingly people aren't. So there's just a few there, and there's lots of stuff like this, and it's kind of okay, not bad little formations, but there is a shadow over it, because it does depend on your opinion. So I can't tell you one way or the other, right, whether the guy could be for real. Maybe he is in contact with this phenomenon, and it's amazing. Look it up, read about it, see how you feel. But of course, the skeptics are really on the attack. I think this guy's out to make money. He's also, you know, getting better, they say, making circles, and so he's just going out making them and getting the press round. It's tricky, and it's very hard to say what's going on. But, nonetheless, again, these shapes speak to people, and so, hey, the Netherlands had quite a few formations this year. Interesting one there, where you've got sort of, you know, the crop sweeping around, but then you've got this absolute straight path going through the middle of it there. So, that's the Netherlands, but of course the rest of the world is there. So here's a few where we had one or two. So a couple up there in Austria. Funny little logo there. Nobody really recognises that. I don't know what that is, but and then you've got literally a simple ring. We've had them in Austria before, but not terribly often. Again, Slovenia occasionally gets activity. That's why we had in Slovenia this year. Slovakia. I haven't seen an aerial shot of that, so I had no idea what the actual pattern was like. This gives you just an idea of, you know, different countries that have been getting them, and I'm not saying these are the only ones they had. Poland manages to produce these two very similar but not quite the same designs. At first glance you think it was the same picture, but then if you look they're not. So, there's something going on there that obviously thinks this kind of style is somehow meaningful. So Poland's had stuff before, never this big. I would say these are the biggest formations that we've seen in Poland before. Czech Republic. This year had two, one a bit more ragged than the other. That's very impressive. I mean, you could amount of that crop that's gone down there. Then you understand why farmers get rather knocky about it, because obviously it's a lot of down crop. They can recover some of it, they can lower the blades, they will get some of that back, but you understand it. Czech Republic, once upon a time in the mid-90s, was a really busy place for circles, and then it kind of went off the boil for a while, but the last few years it's been building back up again. This is what they had this year. Quite a few sort of pairs, where you get a country, you get two formations that are clearly related, just on Poland, and certain themes have emerged, over Europe especially. One in France there, ring circle, one in Belgium, ring circle, the standing centre there. France, I mean, despite being so close to us, and we get so many, you go over the channel and it just doesn't get much stuff, but it did get a couple of ones this year. Another one of which was this, which is kind of intriguing. So, it's like a sacred maze, or a labyrinth maybe. I mean, certainly it's not the neatest formation I've ever seen, but at the same time, that's not easy. And worth noting that then, shortly around the same time, we had a not dissimilar formation in Serbia. Sort of, coming from the same angle again, not the neatest thing you've ever seen, but tapping into that really ancient kind of thing, kind of stuff you find carved onto rocks. I don't remember a formation being in Serbia before, I have to say. We've had them in Croatia and Bosnia and all of that. Serbia's certainly not been a hot spot in my memory. Sorry, I'm going to have to get that. So, Flower of Life, isn't that a nice one? Look, Sweden. I mean, the Flower of Life's appeared on and off for years as a crop circle. This is a particularly fine example. We had one not dissimilar to that, and this is, this might amaze you if you didn't know. Hollingbury near Brighton, about 10 years ago. Really phenomenal one, possibly even better than that, before it all went quiet. There's a funny grid thing here, which I imagine is one of those farmers' grids where they kind of mark stuff out and try different sprays and stuff. That may not be related to that. But the Flower of Life seemed to pop up in a couple of other places as well. Germany, we had like a double vision sort of Flower of Life there. Germany normally gets a lot of stuff going on. This year it was generally quite quiet, but it did provide one of the nicest formations of the year, which you're about to see shortly. And there's another Flower of Life in Italy. So, the Flower of Life is something that has obviously been a bit of a theme this year. Italy had some interesting stuff going on, and that sort of rather funny little jagged lady thing up there is quite intriguing. Another formation there. I mean, Italy comes and goes, but in general, if you discount the Netherlands, right, in general, Italy's closest to England in terms of the numbers of formations that it's had over the years. But once a year, it usually comes up with an absolute stonker, and it did it again this year in the Perino area, which is often where they get them. And this arrives. And it's picking up on themes of previous formations there. Now, I mean, in Italy, there's voracious scepticism, and they claim it's this bunch of artists who live there, and yet they've never produced them. So it's like Doug and Dave, it comes down to what you believe. And it picks up on some of the symbolism of previous ones. We can see that from a different angle. So this is like a compass. You see the little compass points, and people like Red Collie, as he calls himself on Crop Circle Connector, it comes up with all kinds of incredible speculation about what it means. I mean, proving whether you're right or wrong is another matter, but to be sure, it is a really impressive formation. So, that's the thing. This is not just a British formation. You could argue that's more impressive than anything we had this year. So it is a global phenomenon. And another stonker we had was in Germany, in Bavaria. So there you can clearly see some kind of radar dish there. And we had this, which we can see more closely there. Really nice. And I mean, that's now if that appeared in Wiltshire, you just accept it. So this is coming from the same place, as it were, as stuff we've had over the years. What I did think was particularly intriguing was the BBC reported this, right? As amazing design appears in Germany, and you think, yeah, but hang on, what about all the ones we've had? And they ignored them. Isn't that funny? It was like, hey, crop circles are still appearing, but they had to look somewhere else to register that, and the stuff here, they just pretended that wasn't happening. I find that so bizarre. Or, if you want to think more darkly about it, a deliberate lie. But anyway, it is a fantastic formation. And it's got that thing again where imagine it's like you're looking at a football and the checkers seem to go around the back, you know, that they get thinner and thinner, and you get that three-dimensional thing. So it really is quite something. So I mean, you certainly did deserve publicity, that is for sure. Now, talking of ones that got publicity, now, okay, this is disappointing. This is known to be man-made, okay? But there's a little bit of a story behind it. So I'm cheating slightly because this was in the last week of December in 2013. But it got all its publicity this year in 2014, so we'll include it, because we didn't know about it last year. So this arrives, it's like circuit boards and this, that and the other and all this. And then videos get released onto the internet where you see these chaps driving along the road, and it's really brilliantly done. And you see all these flashing lights over the fields, and they're going, what's that? Oh my God, what's that? And then they go and they find this formation has appeared there. So, this again comes down to which side of the fence you're on. So then, it turns out that it's a company. Marcus, you know the name of the company, don't you?
NVIDIA.
NVIDIA, which is like a sort of media digital technology
It's a very
company.
big high-tech company in California.
Okay.
That was
Graphics card.
that was made in California.
Yes, this is California. Yeah, that's
Just south of San
Salinas.
Francisco. Now, NVIDIA make GPUs, graphic processing units. That is their latest design. A graphics processing unit is what you would use in your computer to produce graphics. It's also used in Xboxes and all the gaming machines. There's a lot of money in it, huge amount. There's 192 processing units on that, and the centre square represents 192 in Braille. It's very cleverly done. We know exactly who did it because they appear on a video. Just Google NVIDIA crop circle and you'll get the video which interviews them. They're quite well known in Britain.
Yes, and one of them is a man called Rob Irving, isn't he?
Yes.
Who you said man showed up on a programme at Stonehenge last night, is this correct?
BBC Two, the programme about Stonehenge. Dr. Rob Irving, to give him his alleged full title, I've never heard him called that.
No, I've never heard that.
But obviously the BBC need gravitas. Anyway, he was shown producing the design of Stonehenge on a beach in Dorset using the same technique we used to use a crop circle. Now, there was no indication of crop circles, just that I have to recognise him because Rob Irving and I go back many years. But he appeared on that one, on the video, very professionally done. They got about 75,000 hits in a week around the world.
Which is the point, of course.
You know, they were trying to publicise it. Because the week after that appeared, NVIDIA had their annual meeting in California to announce it. And that's when they came up with the fact, yes, it was done by these very skilled UK crop circle makers. Circlemakers.org is their website, but you won't see that mentioned. The story then moves on to August, when I received an email from NVIDIA. Very flattering, saying, oh, we've seen some of your videos on the internet about the moon landing and stuff like that. We'd really like you to take part in a program we're putting together, introducing our technology, and we feel this would be an appropriate thing to do. So I said, okay, yeah, tell me more about it. But before I tell you anything, we want you to sign this non-disclosure agreement. Which meant that if I had signed it, and had taken part in any program that was originated from NVIDIA, which is a big company, and I would be, or they could have shut me up, legally shut me up, because the non-disclosure agreement is basically quite a common thing. If you're a technology company and you're going to show people, not in the company, the technology you're developing, you're obviously going to protect it, so you've got to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and if you disclose it, you get whacked up in court and fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I thought, why would they want to do that? I'm not a technology geek, I wouldn't know the GPU from a CPU from anything. But they insisted I sign it. Having asked 3 times for them to tell me who else was involved, and they refused, I said, well, bye-bye, I'm not interested.
Yes, no wise.
Because 2 of their clients, one of which is NASA, National Academy of Space Actors, they had NVIDIA provided the technology to enable NASA to enhance the Apollo 11 videos that had gone missing, and all that NASA or anybody had ever seen was a copy of the television set. NVIDIA came up with the technology to allow them to enhance it. The other client they had was Los Alamos Laboratories, who make nuclear weapons. And I was there. So these guys, NVIDIA, are in deep with some pretty big customers. If they're working for NASA, they're hardly going to want to produce a program which questions NASA's ability to do it, which is what I do. And I've got several programs now which are up on YouTube, which have incredible numbers of hits. I don't know where they all come from. But there's a lot of attention because in 4 years' time, we start the 50th anniversary of Apollo. It was so easy to get there in the 1960s, how come they've never been back?
So, yes, they're planning ahead, clearly here.
So we get all this stuff coming up. That's the company behind that. So they were using crop circles as a means to publicise their products. Because of the great success they had, they thought, oh, you know, we could use the same sort of thing to publicise our new product. It's called the TGV. It's very impressive piece of technology.
Thank you, Marcus, I appreciate that. So that fills you in a bit on the fact that there's a lot of layering to this. And here's the thing, so there's 2 things to say. So you've heard a bit of background that this company are big business and they mean business. And it's got a lot of publicity. Again, like the German formation, this was reported widely in the British media. And then, of course, they were able to widely report, oh, it was a hoax. And yet, the British media doesn't want to know about what's going on at its own doorstep that you can't prove is a hoax. So that tells you, again, something about the media relationship. But, I should tell you, there are several people that don't believe it was man-made. Now, you've got to make up your own minds. Because some people say, but that's the cover story. Something made that to show to the world secret technology they were working on because it reveals it, and they had to cover themselves, and then they had to make all these stories up. So some believe it's real, and then some believe that film is real, which people say no, it was made, blah blah blah. That's it. You go around in circles forever, you see. However, here's the thing: it was at least an event in the United States of America. One of the observations that's been made over the years is how come, with America being, you know, so much the centre of so much kind of global activity and, you know, people always talking about America, why is it that we get most of the crop circles and America gets 1 or 2 a year, if they're lucky? And then you've got to say, you know, don't the aliens like Americans? So in fact, the only mysterious, maybe, formation that America actually had in 2014 was this rather kind of little scrappy thing there. There's a place called Benicia in California. So there we go. If you disclude that, and that was last year anyway, that's the only thing that's been reported out of the whole of America. Isn't that odd? Weird, isn't it? So it's almost as if whatever's focusing this is saying, you know, that's not where it's at or what we're trying to do here. They get their own weird phenomena, of course. There's a big country that we've not talked about here that you might also have noticed in the news recently. Because Russia has been very interesting in crop circles over the years. And this year, they've only had one formation, to my knowledge, but it only just appeared on the 5th of September. But boy, it's a stonker. If we can get it to come on, there we go. Russia finally delivers that in grass. And I mean, it seems to be just kind of parkland or something. I don't know what's going on here, but it is thick, long grass with these very long, straight paths. Now, I do not know the background to this. I don't know if there's any claims around it, but it's certainly a pretty big event. And some people think that, you know, given the tensions at the moment between Russia and the West and America, maybe it's kind of that the last of the overseas formations to date, and it's quite an astonishing one, is in Russia. Because, you know, we are very clearly now in a new Cold War, in case you hadn't guessed. And how real much of this is another matter. There's no question that America's been trying to build Russia back up to be the new big enemy for quite a while. They need it. They must have something to kick against. And, you know, Islamic State and Al-Qaeda only go so far. But Russia, they need them to be big and threatening. And Putin is foolish enough to be playing the same game. And he is not a straight man or a good man, you know, but then I don't think either side is here. He's playing the game as well. And I think we're entering times that are going to be quite dangerous. And yet at the same time, it reveals the paucity of world politics and the patheticness of the whole thing. And the fact that the current situation in Ukraine has gone to the place that it has is a sign that we need new management on all sides, I'm afraid to say. And again, there's a lot of accusation that this has been built up and deliberately been allowed to reach crisis because new Cold War is part of their plan. And yet this comes along and suddenly you hear about something else in Russia that's not connected with that. Well, good, because sure, you know, Russia's a big, powerful country, but there's a lot of normal people there living nice, normal lives, and they're really interested in stuff like this. Russia has got a good track record of investigating the paranormal. And also, when I don't know about this particular one, but when they've had crop circles in the past, they usually send the military out. They cordon off the area and they send in, you know, all kinds of research teams and all of that, as opposed to here, where everybody just goes, oh, like rubbish, you know. You see the old black helicopter, maybe. Over there, it's rather nice, you know, they give it something more. So maybe, you know, that's a very kind of apt place to have ended the year. And of course, hey, we've still got several months to go. It may well be that we're not done yet. But I definitely think the crop circle mystery is certainly not done in general. After all the concerns that it was going to go away and vanish, well, I don't think that's the case. And it's showing that they still have currency. They're still moving people and touching people in here. And I mean, I'm almost now at the place where I really don't worry too much about ever nailing this. You know, I think most people who've been researching this for years have come to embrace the mystery. You know, does it matter which are man-made and which are not? If it's having the same effect, does it actually matter? And the skeptics that keep so loudly keep saying, well, they're all man-made, you're all man-made, you're being misled. Are we? Maybe the effect it's having is exactly what we all need. Who cares? It's the collective speaking through these symbols, wherever you choose to think they come from. And I would say that right now, the collective is incredibly dynamic and active. There's so much going on in the world. Yes, there are threats. Yes, there are big issues to be dealt with. And yet, I think a lot of us feel we're on the cusp of a choice, of a massive opportunity for change and transformation. And the circles have brought many people to that point of awareness that, yeah, maybe there are other things and there's deeper things beyond all the kind of trivia that, you know, we are sort of constantly bombarded with. There's something deeper going on. So you've got a sense there of what's occurring. And I would like to thank, by the way, all the people whose pictures I've stolen. Because, you know, it's fair use. But in particular, I pay tribute to CropCircleConnected.com, Mr. Gyro, who used to be a acclaimed circle maker and is now making himself more useful by photographing them, and Lucy Pringle. These people have, you know, put this stuff out there, they put the work in, go online, support them. because obviously this is a network out there at work here. Not one person could do all of this. So I pay tribute to those who are still keeping tabs on this phenomenon, who are still researching, still keeping it close to their hearts. It's great. And I just think now that anything could still happen, and you know, it might go up and down and fluctuate from year to year. But I think what is clear now is that this isn't going to go away anytime soon, and we'll hurrah to that. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much. So we have a few minutes for questions or comments.
Yeah,
Yes. So.
Quite a few years ago, I went down to Wiltshire to see a crop circle, and there were quite a number of people in the different circles. I can't remember which one it was, but there was strange sound coming from it, and I wonder if
The trilling sound,
it
perhaps?
was, from what I remember, it was quite a few years ago. It was also the sound of the TARDIS or something, something like that. But everybody was hearing it. It was a big circle,
Yes.
and there were people sitting around in different circles, and everybody was saying, "What's that noise?" You know, and no one could quite work out where it was coming from. So I was just wondering if it's a common phenomenon.
Well, it makes a good point. Certainly back in the 90s especially, there was a lot more sort of attention put onto strange sounds heard in and around crop circles, it's true. And very often people would hear this high-pitched whistling or trilling, and some said it was a bird, but others said it couldn't be because they recorded it and they analysed it and they said it was some kind of high-frequency signal. We never really got to the bottom of it, to be honest. People occasionally report it still today, but there seems to be less attention on that. And I certainly haven't heard anything peculiar on a crop circle in recent years, but people do occasionally report things. I mean, the other thing used to be, remember this, the mystery footsteps. People would often, you know, you go into a crop circle, people often lie down, don't they, and get in the way in the middle and they meditate and all this. But often the people who do that here, and they swear there's no one there, strange footsteps crunching around them, which I've heard from many people over the years, and they look out and there's just absolutely nobody there. So, you know, I mean, it is another side to this that is worth research in its own right, of course. So, yes, of course, please do. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How long do they last?
Sorry, go ahead. How long do they last? Well, that's a very good question. I mean, basically, they're going to be there in some form or another till somebody cuts them down. So if you get one that appears in the early part of the season, it will be there, you know, for weeks, months possibly, but after a while the crop grows back up. It doesn't look like very much. Later on, when the crops are more young and ripe, it's going to stay flat for longer. It gets pretty nasty after a while, and the birds nibble the seeds and the edges bow down. In the end, they'll cut them down, of course. Although, sometimes you can still see where they were, and sometimes a year or even 2 years later, when they've grown new crop on, you get this ghost image of that same design coming back, where crop doesn't seem to grow so well on that area, or grows taller, which is something that's been much debated. It's like there's some effect in the soil going on, which tests that the Ministry of Agriculture did back in 1995 would seem to support, because they, believe it or not, actually tested some crop circles for the soil, and they found that there was an imbalance in the nitrate and nitrogen ratio, which they just couldn't explain, but it might explain the effect of crop growth that you often get on those same sites. So they're sometimes hard to get rid of.
You mentioned that in the UK, a lot of the crop circles, the majority of the crop circles, are formed on chalk. Does that correlate to the crop circles around the world, or in Europe or Sweden? Are they predominantly on chalk?
Not chalk, but they are nearly always on the primary aquifer. Chalk happens to be our best local aquifer, but in other countries, of course, there's other geological strata. It is always, it would seem, the areas that get the most underground water. Yes, and BLT research, Levin Good and Nancy Talbot and all that bunch, they did investigate that some years back and found yes, it is a recurring trait around the world.
And
yes.
On Facebook, I don't think you're on Facebook, are you?
To a certain degree.
Okay. But on Facebook, there's certain, if you're interested in crop circles, there are a few pages devoted to crop circles. But I found that two of the biggest ones actually, yes, they admit that they actually believe they're man-made, which seems to sort of wonder why they actually bother with it. One of them report a crop circle formation with, as it Mr. Perker, be familiar with
Andrew Perker,
Andrew
yes.
Perker, who seems to have battles with Charles Mallet every day.
It's ever so boring. I've had it with all of that. Andrew Perker is basically a debunker. He did good work years ago, and then he decided he thought they were all man-made. Now, instead of just saying about, hey, look at the effect they're having, he got very bitter and decided to sort of try and shoot it all down. So unfortunately, he's still there doing that, but he just yawned now.
Yeah, I feel like Matthew Williams, because I went to the base, Miles Johnson put on the basis conference and that, and like, he'll say that, you know, crop circles man-made, but they're experiencing this paranormal phenomena.
Oh yes, many of them
And
report
it's
that.
like, you know, they want their cake and eat it.
But at least Williams still has a fascination for
Yeah.
it and an appreciation of it as an art form.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give him that. Whereas some of them, yeah, they just seem to be troublemakers. And some of what's on there on the net, of course, and this is true of many realms like this, it's misinformation. You've got to see what fits right in here with you. At the end of the day, you've got to have your own mind and see how it feels to you. And no one's going to be able to give you the answer to this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about it tonight.
Well, we've been up to Nat Hill to look at the Skywatch, and we definitely saw some strange lights and David Griffin's, and I think we did have some sort of contact or something.
Yeah, there's still weird stuff
Yeah.
going on. Listen, I think we'll just take a couple more quick. Can I just say, if anybody sneaks out, if you didn't pay Helen when you went in, if you could help us to keep this place going, that'd be great. Thanks so much. Well, yeah, question here?
Just like to ask about this texturing and that. I've not really noticed such fine, beautiful texture on another.
Right.
Yeah, is that something that's newish or is?
No, not really. I mean, the texturing is something that's really been there for a very long time. I think it's sort of more pronounced in recent years, where it's really got played with. But, I mean, you can go back to the 1980s and find just simple circles where they had incredible lays in them. Which is one of the things that I find fascinating, because even though they were just simple, the technique with which the crop was going down was the same back then as it is now. And, you know, for those that just say, oh, well, you know, they're all man-made today, but they weren't back then, and all of this, you think, that's a bit odd, because they could have made anything far earlier than they did, because they clearly had the skills and the same ability to work with crop that they do now. So why didn't they do it earlier? You know, were they really that patient? So, yes, that texturing, it is more overt now, but you'd be surprised. You look back at some of the early shots, the complexity of that lay. It's really quite something. And that was one of the first things that people like Pat Delgado and Terence Meaden and Colin Andrews noticed, and they thought, hang on a minute, that's not just a whirlwind in the simple sense. So then they split off, and Terence Meaden said, well, it must be the weather, but he said, okay, it must be a more complex model. And he developed what he called the plasma vortex theory. But Andrews and Delgado thought, no, there's something more paranormal going on here. So that's when that kind of divide began, by looking at the complexities that they're finding and realising, well, we've got to find a solution for this. And here we are, and we still haven't resolved it. But that kind of effect was there. But with the stars within the lay and the basket weave, that has certainly become more overt in recent years.
I can't believe that there's people doing that thing man-made out there and nobody's actually noticed them doing it. If it's taking 7 or 8 hours, there must be a farmer walking around wondering what.
This is one of the problems we have. I mean, yes, we know from experiments you can do certain things in certain circumstances, but some, as we mentioned, one example, the Stonehenge, have appeared within really short periods of time, sometimes in daylight hours, and then you say, well, hang on a minute, how was nobody seen? And the other thing is, when you look at what's involved in making crop circles, when you look at the films of people making them, often there's equipment, there's paraphernalia, you've got to park your car somewhere, you're going to draw attention to yourself, and yet so few people ever seem to be caught in the act. I mean, there's been the odd possible sighting and people have filmed figures in the film, but that's not catching them in the act. It's possibles, And yes, that is one of the things that's all rather mysterious. And then, as Colin said, you hear from some of the people that claim to make them themselves, and they'll tell you the weird stuff they've seen. They're out there supposedly making circles, lights appear around their heads. John Lundberg, who's made a few of them for TV, has described how they've gone out to make a formation commission for a television programme, and it's there before they get there. And only they knew the design. Now, when you hear things like that, you say, there's something just really odd here. That's what everyone finds. There have been attempts over the years, normally from Americans, I have to say, that we'll solve this, we're going to sort this out. So camera crews come in, they spend the whole summer, and they film everyone, and they stay with the hoaxers, they go out with the researchers, and they do night watches, and virtually everybody I've ever spoken to has done that. The other end says, I just don't know what's going on anymore. I thought it was going to be so simple, and actually you realise there's so many layers of weirdness to this. And even the sceptic or hoaxer people acknowledge that too. And you realise we're tapping into something here that's operating on a very deep and very strange level, which is part of its fascination, of course. So yes, it really is keeping us, I think, just pulling us forward all the time by not being pinned down.
Can we just say as well that the geometrically perfect ones, the stonkers as you call them, they're just perfect, aren't they? There are no mistakes.
In some of them, I mean, if you analyse bit by bit, you could probably find some weren't 100% perfect here or perfect there. But some are. I mean, we've had some that are just masterpieces of geometrical precision. And it just boggles the mind. Because you try and draw them on a piece of paper and you see how long it takes. And then you think, oh yeah, these are appearing there hundreds, sometimes thousands of feet across. So, this is all part of the puzzle.
These are not on flat fields.
Second.
I said these are not on flat fields.
No, you're absolutely right.
There are hardly any fields in England which are absolutely flat.
Because you get a false view from these pictures, you think, oh, it's nice flat. You're absolutely right, Molly. When you stand inside them, and those of you that have will know this, often you find the field undulates, there's topography. There's a field of patching near Littlehampton where we had a kind of floral formation one year. And the hill that it was on was so steep, I mean, you were almost mountaineering to get up to it, and the formation had appeared there, and it wasn't flat. How they ever get the combines up there, I have no idea. But you wouldn't know that by looking at the aerial shots. You just think it's on flat ground, and that's often not the case at all. So yes, which is something else. You're dealing with uneven ground and humps and bumps, and it's something which has to be taken into account. Yes?
It's related to that. Just wondering if there's sometimes a clear where, they're not noticed for a week or two because they're so often each traffic is not overlooked at all.
Yes. Some do get missed. Yes, it does happen. I mean, mostly in places like Wiltshire, I mean, people fly now, and there's a lot of attention in some areas, so they will get found. But every now and then you'll find there was something there that you didn't know about. I mean, we had a formation at Goodwood about 4 years ago in Sussex, and we didn't find out till after the fact, and it just turned out somebody had managed to photograph it, didn't bother to tell anyone at the time. So they can get missed. It does happen, but I think mostly they're found. But to be sure, you probably find after a few months that there's 3 or 4 more we could add in here. Probably not in Wiltshire because there's so many people investigating that area. But just sometimes they get missed. And certainly around the world, I mean, some are in very remote areas, and you'll find that reports only come in like much later, months later sometimes. So there's more probably than we know.
They don't just want to be seen.
Well, that's one of the things, isn't it? We all assume they're there for our attention and for us to see them, and sometimes it's like, no, they're there for their own strange purposes. If you believe that they're changing Earth energies and all of that, maybe they're serving other purposes and they just happen to be nice to look at. Maybe some are for one purpose and some are for another purpose. But we always very arrogantly think they're speaking to us. But maybe they're speaking for many different things, and we just think they're speaking to us, So, yes, it may be that some are not supposed to be, interpreted as such, but they serve a function in the landscape. Listen, we're going to stop there. You've all been very, very kind. Thanks for coming up. I'm so thirsty. I'm sure some of us are going to brave the Potters and go and have a drink. It's really busy there on a Friday night, but we're going anyway. So if you want to come over and get a drink in, do come over. I should tell you that we've got one more meeting booked this year, 21st of November. Malcolm Robinson, some of you will know Malcolm. He's been researching paranormal stuff for years, very entertaining. He's got a lot of very interesting views, and he's talking about the weird and the wonderful, investigating the paranormal. So if you're into ghosts and earth mysteries and actually anything, you know, it's going to be a night to come to. Can I just make a note, if anybody knows anybody that picked up some of our leaflets, we very stupidly had the wrong date on some of the leaflets. So there's bound to be one or two people show up here next Friday. You know of anybody that might have had a leaflet, tell them they missed it. That'd be very kind of you.
About 8 of us came last night.
Last night? No, that's not our fault. Listen, thank you for coming.
The information where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.